when you open the door for somebody else.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Vaccine Conversation with Melissa and Dr. Bob. Today, we are continuing our interview with Dr. Bob. So if you've missed the first episode, go back and check it out. Part 1 with Dr. Bob Sears, an in-depth interview, getting to know more about him, his career, what kind of led him to where he is. We've talked about some of the stuff on the podcast, but figured we'd make it a dedicated episode. And so today we're going to continue learning more about this man. Many of you that see him as a hero, and he's written a book that brought you into the topic of vaccines and given you a lot more information on this to help guide your family to make informed decisions. So let's continue our interview now. What led you to be interested in the topic of vaccines enough to where you wanted to write a book on it? And what was your initial kind of idea of like what kind of book it was going to be? Like, what was the purpose of the book and what led you there?
Yeah. And I would maybe refer people, they can listen back to one of our very first podcasts where we kind of talk about each other's stories, kind of what led me into the whole vaccine issue to begin with. So maybe,
yeah, so not that part, but more so like you're practicing, you've already had this interest in vaccines, but what made you think I need to write a book about this, and what kind of book does it need to be? Yeah,
so it was basically, as I was giving these evening lectures to patients in my office, because I was already providing alternative vaccine schedules. I'd already slowed the schedule down.
Did you think it was concerning that it had been ramped up the way it had?
Oh yeah. I saw the big schedule and the stupidity of having hepatitis B vaccine on the schedule for every American newborn is kind of what woke me up to even scrutinize the schedule. And so then I realized, hey, I need to give the vaccines for infants, for diseases that are really, problematic diseases for babies. And so I basically prioritized the schedule and delayed vaccines that were less critical for the first year that could be given later because we don't have that disease in the United States. And so many patients wanted that approach. And so I was very happy to offer that approach. And a lot of people followed my selective alternative schedule. But then I was having like these hour-long patient consults with each individual patient who wanted to basically, pick my brain about vaccines. And I kind of got tired after maybe the 100th visit. I thought, well, I'm saying the same thing to every patient over and over again. I started changing that into group visits. And we'd have these patient meetings in my office every week, and I'd give the same lecture to like 10 patients. But then after the 10th one of those, I was like, I'm just, the same lecture over and over again. I'm like, I'm just going to write all this down. So I basically wrote it as a typed out Word document, my lecture. And then I was like, hey, this would be a cool book. And then my dad's like, this is, I think, probably one of the times I did not take his advice. My dad's like, please don't write a vaccine book.
Oh my gosh.
Please, 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 please don't write a vaccine book. Because he knew what, the controversy it was.
And you're like, Dad, I'm going to go see Underground tonight.
Okay, not only is that funny, but you totally got the name wrong.
Underground? Undercover. Undercover. Okay. Dad, I'm going to go see Undercover tonight. If you see a pillow under my bed, that's me sleeping.
That's so funny.
AKA, I'm going to publish this vaccine book.
Yeah. So
Underground.
I basically wrote it as a Word document, and I gave it to a bunch of patients. I said, can you read this? Can you critique it? Give me feedback? And it was vetted by a lot of patients for a few months. And then I basically published the book, and then the publisher and my father had a talk with me and basically said, we need to do some editing here. We need to kind of present it a little bit more softly. We need to kind of make it a little bit more palatable for mainstream and maybe not, kind of soften, some of the, negative things, or if you're basically discussing some risks about
it
vaccines.
Can cause brain damage some of the time, but it's just not for everybody. But anyway, moving on to this section.
I basically had to kind of infuse the book with some I don't know what the term is, qualifying, statements like, oh, I'm a pro-vaccine doctor, and vaccines have risk, or
Instead of vaccines have risks.
right,
Yeah,
exactly. And so I kind of
Vaccines have
like
saved millions of lives,
Right.
but they also have risks for some.
yes, yeah, no, you're right. I had to kind of like pepper the book with
Yeah.
a lot of statements like that, and actually had to kind of leave certain things out of the book, and I had to kind of do that in order for the book to be published as part of the Sears parenting library of books.
And at that point, your dad already had how many books?
He had, I don't know, 7 or 8 maybe in the library.
And they were all very successful.
Yeah, they
right?
were. And so I agreed to it, but it was an honest reflection of kind of how I felt back then about
Sure.
vaccines. This was
Yeah.
basically 2005 and 6 when I wrote the book, and it was published in 2007. And I think it was honest and fair. It left some things out that I couldn't maybe prove or give evidence for, and so it was the first version. I was very proud of it, and I think I felt like I just had to do it. I mean, I feel like it's all about informed consent. I mean, that's what we're all about now, but I was way about that. My mission in life was to not steer anybody or not have an agenda, but basically lay out, here's the pros, here's the cons, make your decision. And
So did you go on a book tour after that was published?
yeah.
How did you get that set up?
Back then you could get on news shows, everywhere. They're happy to talk about vaccines and vaccine, controversies. And, oh yeah, it was like wide open.
So were you nervous doing the interviews?
Oh, totally.
And stuff?
I mean, if you saw some of the footage, I was probably so dorky. I mean, I was.
So nothing's changed.
Okay, fine. Nothing's changed. But I didn't have any media training, but it was fun. It was interesting to do, and reporters were kind of interested. But I was very soft about it. I was basically kind of like, yeah, vaccines are important, and vaccines, have helped, eliminate lots of diseases.
But here's a different way you can do that.
Yeah, and vaccines can have some side effects, so let's look out for this. And if you're concerned about vaccines or you're worried about giving too many, here's a slower way to do it. And that was kind of my platform.
Right.
Here's a slower way to do it. And so I think news outlets were very accepting of that kind of moderate viewpoint.
So were you surprised that the book was successful?
No, it was like the only other couple of books out there were that were sort of complete vaccine guides was what your doctor may not be telling you about your childhood vaccines. Was that Cave? Was that Stephanie Cave?
I don't know. I haven't seen
I
that
think it was
one.
Stephanie Cave. That was one of the original ones that came before mine. It was a very good book as well. I think mine was probably the second overall book that kind of covered the whole, but it was softer than the other books. It was softer than Stephanie's book. It was softer than how to raise a child in spite of your doctor, and it basically gave you an objective pros and cons without my opinion. Whereas a lot of the other books would give you the pros and cons and then their conclusion of don't do it. I left that conclusion like out of the book.
Do you think the conclusion for you would sort of be implied, though, because of all of the peppered statements that are in there of the conclusion is still sort of like, but these are important and everybody should do them kind of thing?
I kind of felt like I so thoroughly presented the risks of aluminum. Mm-hmm. I didn't soften that. I feel like I was very upfront about that and the risks
because
of,
that's not really attacking vaccines. That's attacking an
right,
ingredient in
right,
vaccines. Yeah.
Right. And then I think I was very upfront with, what the risk of encephalitis is and what the risk of encephalopathy and seizures. I was pretty upfront with that, but I feel like that was sort of in the back of the book. And so I think a lot of people were very much drawn towards my alternative schedules, feeling like, well, if I've written about them and they're in the book and that's what I'm doing in my office.
Right.
It must be, very, very safe. It must be completely safe. I don't have to worry about all these side effects because I'm doing it more slowly. And I think a lot of people were drawn to that and liked that idea. And so that was kind of like one group of people, but then there was also a group of people that basically read my objective information and decided, gosh, there's more risk here than I'm comfortable with. I'm not going to vaccinate because I don't want to take the risk. I'm not going to put aluminum into my child. And so some people also kind of took that conclusion from the book. I think
Well,
it was
definitely
kind of a mix.
brought people into the discussion being mainstream. You know, it's funny that people in our movement criticize people for being mainstream, but you have to understand being mainstream includes the most amount of people. And being mainstream is being inclusive of all different viewpoints on the topic.
Right.
Your goal is not to just push everybody over to the side and say everybody needs to not vaccinate. Like, that's not my goal. That's not your goal. I've never told anybody that they just shouldn't vaccinate. What I want them to do is have the information to make a good decision about it that is, you know, kind of weighing these pros and cons and have access to the other side of the information. But that has nothing to do with what you hope or think they're going to do on the other side of it. Everybody has free will and choice. So if you are more extreme, then your audience is going to be a lot smaller because there are people who don't even know about this. And so hey, I'm having a baby. I kind of want to research vaccines. Oh, here's this book called The Vaccine Book. Let me get it. And that's kind of giving like this introduction to the topic, to a very complex topic to people who would otherwise not know it. And it brings a level of awareness, like you're saying, by being mainstream. Had you been a lot more on one side, you would have had a much smaller audience.
Oh, yes.
A lot
Yeah.
less people would have been exposed to that information. And now many of the people, so I remember somebody telling me about the alternative schedule, your alternative schedule.
Yeah.
And that's why I only picked two for her first appointment. And I remember asking the pediatrician which two are the most important. And it was kind of, I remember looking at the alternative schedule somewhere and seeing that and kind of going, okay, what's necessary or what's the least amount and how to space them out or whatever. Of course, as we know, it doesn't matter for some kids.
Right.
If you do one or two, it could still be too many. And
Right.
spacing out doesn't prevent injuries for everybody, but we know that loading them up definitely increases the likelihood of injuries. So
Right.
it's not a guaranteed way to keep children from being injured, but it definitely, makes sense that it would reduce that risk. But somebody like me, I had no understanding about vaccines at all. I knew not a single person that didn't vaccinate. So if I'm going to do it, which is what I was thinking I'm doing because this is what everybody does, then I'm moving forward in that path. Then that would be like a book I would read. And then you'd learn more about it. And then as you learn more about it, you would find yourself deciding which side of the fence that you're on. But it just makes a lot more sense to people who criticize that mainstream view. And I know you've had critics in our community for being so mainstream because they feel like, oh, you're promoting vaccines and we know vaccines cause injury. And it's like, no, you're promoting choice. You're promoting
Right,
choice
yes.
for all patients. If somebody's completely informed on this issue and they choose to get a medication, a prescription, a medical intervention, a pharmaceutical product, that is their choice. You can't take choice away from somebody, even if you know how bad it is for them.
Right.
Or you think it's going to be bad for them. There are side effects to every medication, and people prescribe medication, by the hundreds of thousands, every single year. You can't not do it. It's a patient's choice. You give a recommendation, but it's their choice. So you always supported choice. By kind of appealing to that mainstream, you were allowing the majority of people to get information that would have otherwise not gotten that information. And that
Right.
and that really was the way that you felt, obviously, at that time. So that all was kind of in alignment with your belief system. But it's like, that was, I think, a blessing to so many by being that way, because you were getting to people who otherwise would not have.
Yeah.
Probably by a factor of 20 to 1, maybe
Right,
30
yeah.
to 1.
Yeah, and that was totally my goal, was to be able to reach way more people with the objective information. And if I could keep an agenda out of it and put all the science-based information that might be negative about vaccines, but is scientifically valid, put all of that in the book, but in a way where I'm not going to lead you to any one decision. I'm going to require you to make an educated decision and educate yourself and weigh the pros and cons and weigh the disease risk versus the vaccine risk. And I sort of came to believe that, yes, I feel like doing fewer vaccines at a time, doing them more slowly, delaying some, I do feel like that is a safer way to do it. And I feel like you will see fewer reactions. Mm-hmm. I've talked to a lot of people over the years where they only did one vaccine and they were injured.
Sure.
Or they did like the first 3 or 4 months of an alternative schedule, and on that 4th month they were injured. Even though, and like your child, you did it spaced out and still injured. So I came to believe that there's a certain segment of our population has some sort of genetics or something about their metabolism that's going to make them way more susceptible to vaccine injury. So one vaccine could do it. And I feel like maybe there's a huge segment of our population that maybe, could seem to handle vaccines. If you spread them out and go slowly, they could maybe handle them. Right.
Or their reactions might be much, much more subtle.
Yes, subtle.
Over time.
Right, subtle. And the chance of having like a very severe immediate reaction could be very, very small, but there could be chronic underlying negative effects that are going to maybe happen to almost everybody that your body deals with in a variety of ways. But I feel like there's a segment of the population that even any alternative schedule is gonna not mix well with their body. And so I came to kind of realize that, over the years. And
did that lead you to some book changes in your most recent edition?
Yeah. So, last year I kind of finally got around to rewriting the book, and then there was all kinds of delays in it. And actually, I think I finished rewriting it like a year and a half ago. And then there was some delays. And so after SB 276, that fight last year in California, I was able to actually do some more changes. And so I finished the changes, I think last November, and then something delayed the printing, and then COVID hit. And so it actually just came out, I think, just a couple weeks ago.
So what's the difference now with this new edition?
Yeah, so it's labeled, it looks the same, the cover's the same, but on the inside it says 3rd edition, so that's how you would know, and it says 2019 on the inside. I really added a whole element on the politics of vaccination and how to fight mandatory vaccine laws in your state, like kind of some of the main talking points and political strategies. I fully updated all the diseases and vaccine brands and everything there. That's kind of easy to do. Let's see, I really reworked the aluminum section because I think there's a lot you and I have learned about aluminum and some of the new research on aluminum that we've learned from Dr. Exley and Dr. Shaw. And so that was kind of fun to be able to add that part. I added lots of very interesting stuff about herd immunity. I think if you've heard me kind of give my herd immunity spiel on the podcast here, I really lay that out in the book. And I really describe kind of my impression and my observations of the non-vaccinating family, like what I've learned from them over the years and what I think about their health and kind of what seems like a grand irony. And I hope more and more people decide to do research on this, because it'd be great if we actually had some good research comparing non-vaccinating children's health to those who have vaccinated and to those who have partially vaccinated. We have some preliminary research on it, but it's very small.
Right.
But I sort of shared on what my impression is of those families that I hope might someday be borne out in research. So those are some of the changes, but I think one of the main differences is I completely rewrote the chapter on alternative vaccine schedules. Like I totally changed it into a chapter on me basically walking people through the decision and every aspect of the decision and every option and how do you factor this disease and what's this disease risk based on your age and these vaccines and going to school and how does herd immunity factor in and what is the risk of side effects. And I think I did a much better chapter on walking you through that than the earlier versions of the book. But then I did decide, I felt it was important to me to basically remove the alternative vaccine schedules from the book, to not have them in the book anymore. You can find them online. They're available online. You can search them out. Because I felt like that was, since I'm not your doctor, I didn't want to basically make the medical decision for you and say, here's the actual way to do it. If you're gonna read all this and educate yourself and you're gonna make the decision, with yourself and maybe with your doctor that you're going to go ahead with vaccines, you need a doctor to guide you through that, and a doctor to basically say, okay, we're going to do this vaccine this month and this vaccine the next month. We're going to do these two now. And you're going to have to find a doctor to kind of work that out with you because it's complicated. There's 69 doses. And I felt much better about people finding a vaccine-friendly doctor, which we kind of give resources, in the book. I think the best place to find the vaccine-friendly doctor list nowadays, I think, is Dr. Green Mom. Dr. Green Mom has a website, and on there she has how to find a vaccine-friendly doctor. Oh, it's on my website too, my book's website, thevaccinebook.com. That website was gone for several years. Is offline for several years. I just reactivated it. So I wanted patients to find a vaccine-friendly doctor to basically work out an individual schedule instead of taking it out of my book. So I felt much better about that, and I love this new version. I think it much more accurately reflects all the latest ideas that you and I have put together over these recent years in a way that just kind of, I think, gives the reader a much more complete look at the vaccine decision. And so, I'm very happy about it.
I've definitely earned a trip to Cancun then as a result of all the research I've led you to that helped you for your new edition of the book. Yeah. Just kidding. But okay, so to kind of conclude with this, I want to know something. I want to know two things: the high and the low kind of your career in medicine. What was the high? What was some best memory, experience, event, or something where you just knew that this was always going to stick with you?
Well, I would say the high that doesn't necessarily have to do with vaccines. Really, the high point was bailing, and I'll tell you the low point because it's similar. The high point was bailing on medical insurance, canceling all my medical insurance contracts. Like I said earlier, I was just miserable, trying to see, 7-8 checkups an hour and, 8 sick kids an hour, rushing them through. And my patients wanted more. I wanted to give more. And so I basically said, I can't do it with insurance anymore. I lost half my patients, which we knew we would. We expected we would, because there is a certain number of patients that just basically want to use their insurance and don't mind those 10-minute checkups. But all the patients that wanted those 20, 30-minute checkups and didn't mind spending $120 on a checkup, that's all it was.
Well, especially they're not going that often anyway.
Right. So, you're right. Yeah. So I could just sit there and do 20-minute checkups, answer questions.
And get to know the families.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So the relationships I built with these families has been so rewarding. Now I know these kids. I know the parents. I know the kids. And I know them so much better. And they know me too. They kind of care about me. I mean, patients will ask me, how are you doing? And I'll say, I'm doing great. They'll, no, really, how are you doing? And I'll be like, okay, then we talk a little bit about how I'm doing. And sometimes it's a 30-minute checkup just because, it's maybe, it's a slower day. And that made me such a happier person. I mean, I went from being stressed and miserable to being super happy. And I remember the patient that kind of, so that was sort of like a low point that led to a high point. And so when I got rid of insurance, that became very stressful financially. Cheryl was super stressed. We were moving and remodeling the house. It was the worst time to not make enough money.
So was the low then losing the clientele as a result?
Well, no. So, I think so. That was kind of there was a low point that led to a real high. It was so much happier, and I kept making just as much money, just seeing half the patients and way happier. So everyone is happier, right? And so that's just led to many years of having a very happy, calm, quiet practice. And a low point, however, was losing the military insurance, because I kept the military insurance.
Right, I remember.
So I said bye to all other insurances, but I kept, because I had about 400 families on Camp Pendleton right here that that was a joy to see. They needed a pediatrician who would listen to them with vaccines, right? So I was there to serve them, and I was happy to take, the insurance rates on that because, everyone wants to support the military. So to me, is a great privilege to do that. So then the low point when I went through all my medical board stuff, part of the consequence of being on medical board probation that we've talked about on this podcast was all insurances will say goodbye to you. And so that was fine because I'd already said goodbye to everyone else, 13 years ago. But the military insurance said goodbye to me. And so all those patients, I think 3 or 4 of them still come to me, but financially they just were not able to anymore. So that was a big loss. And I still feel that loss. And people still call our office, from the military wondering if we take it, and, we have to say no, and we'll still see them, at a discount. But, that was kind of a low point. Of course, all the medical board stuff was a low point, which is I always say I kind of signed up for it. If I'm going to take that alternative, unpopular view on vaccines, the establishment has ways to come after you and ways that I didn't realize, Like I didn't care if, insurance doesn't like me because I don't take insurance. I don't care if other doctors don't like me because I don't need them to like me. But it turns out there is a professional board that has the authority to oversee how you practice. And most professions have such a professional board. And so when you think outside the box and you operate outside the box using an unpopular way to do things,
even if it's evidence-based.
Even if it's evidence-based, yeah. And there's a board who oversees you who likes the mainstream.
Right.
That puts you at an interesting risk that came at me out of nowhere. That was a big surprise to me. That was a low point, definitely.
So now, are any of your kids looking to go into medicine?
Yes. The good news is my middle child is applying to medical schools. So he's looking at going into medicine. And
what is he thinking for specialization?
I don't know, but he we don't talk much about vaccines. I don't talk with any of my kids much about vaccines until now. My oldest kid has a grandbaby, so we've been talking a lot about it. But I feel like he's similar to me. He's open-minded and he's naturally oriented. And so I think, I would imagine he would certainly be the kind of doctor that would accept patients who don't vaccinate or who want an alternative way to go about doing it. But he's not in medical school, so he would be at least 8 years away from actually realizing and becoming a practicing doctor. Yeah.
So what is on the horizon for you? Anything interesting?
More rest.
Yeah.
Are you going to make me keep doing things? No,
outside of the podcast tour.
I know. I mean, I want to keep practicing, of course. Our youngest child's going off to college, and that's kind of a great joy. So I'm entering that phase in life where it's just get to take a little breath and relax and kind of get up in the morning and there's no one to take care of and no one to make breakfast for. And it's happy and sad, right? But I'm kind of feeling like I don't necessarily have a desire to take on more and do more and more things get busier. I'm almost wanting to shift, focus my attention on this vaccine fight. I think that's something I'm always going to do, especially because I have someone fun and intelligent and inspiring and someone motivating, who's my friend that I can do this with. So I
need to interview her.
So I mean, that motivates me. So I feel like I'm always going to want to do that. But I don't know that I'm have the energy to just just full time go out and completely try to change the world. I feel like I need to kind of keep doing it. I don't know, through my writing, through podcasting in ways that's sustainable for me, and I still totally want to do our video podcast project and make a film of it. I'm definitely passionate about that, but I'll always do this issue. I don't think I'm going to ever take on another issue. I think this is always going to be the issue for me. And it gives me great joy to talk to any parent about the vaccine decision and provide materials for parents to read. So that I thrive on that. but I have to admit I'm tired, and I kind of want to go through a little bit of time of life right now where I'm sitting at home and there's nothing to do. I can sit in the backyard and read, and go down to the harbor and kayak. Thing. My sister gave me her kayak. I get to go take that for spins around the harbor. Exercise and work. Continue to work some, and keep doing what we're doing, and as long as we can do it. I don't know. I don't know. You tell me. Do I have anything new that I don't know about?
But you have your new release of your book. You have your other book, John Philip Ryan book.
Yeah, that's been fun. We didn't even talk about that, but that's been a wonderful joy to talk about that. People can basically, they can find that on.
I was going to say, where can they follow you and kind of find information on you outside of just the vaccine issue, your own specific thing? Where's your social media content?
Yeah, I'd say it's basically, there's johnphilipryan.com is that book. There's thevaccinebook.com is that book. There's Dr. Bob Sears on Facebook. I don't post a lot anymore because I feel like Facebook just doesn't matter. But I have a Dr. Bob Sears Instagram that I don't post much on, but I kind of do. And I don't know. I think I'd say this podcast, honestly, is probably the place where I will share the most, personal details of my life and keep people updated and chat with people. And I feel like, even if this eventually slows down, I feel like there's always going to be hey, let's come back and do a few, or let's, catch up and keep connected that way. So there's that. And there's a podcast tour, of course, but I'm just going to keep on doing it until I can't do it anymore.
And you can learn a little bit more about Dr. Bob Sears on my podcast, What They Aren't Telling You, as we talk about the unpopular opinion, and we will wrap that up. Yeah,
and today. I forgot about IEG. Duh. Since I've gotten away from Facebook, I haven't done much with Immunity Education Group. But we have immunityeducationgroup.org. That's kind of where our podcast, kind of like our tour, kind of is hosted from. So if you want to,
podcast reference sources and stuff.
Yeah, so I think if you want to kind of maybe follow the podcast, keep tabs on immunityeducationgroup.org and we, that's our nonprofit that we do work through as well. So there's all these different angles that I'm just as passionate about now as I always have been. And it was just kind of interesting to be in this time of life where I also need to take time to not always just vacation, but sometimes you just got to sit and do nothing, let your brain relax. But anyway.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for joining us on the Vaccine Conversation, Dr. Bob.
Well, thank you for having me, Melissa. This has
been
Melissa
and Dr. Bob.
A joy.
So thank you, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode, getting to know a little more about Dr. Bob.
And I should interview you.
No,
maybe.
I think I'm good.
Maybe season 3. Season 3.
We'll see if I do anything fantastic between now and then and have a reason to be interviewed. But most people are on this podcast. They're here for you, so they want to.
They came for me. They stay for you.
Yes. Well, whatever it is, it works, and we love you guys. And I can't wait to see you on tour soon. And thank you for joining us on this episode of the Vaccine Conversation.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional for information on vaccines and infectious diseases.